Where were you then, Saturday, 26th of March, 2005? Where were you? Because I remember distinctly, I was in Birmingham. I got a job down in the Midlands in the UK. And I had an apartment block and I was staring at 20, 30, 40 apartment blocks opposite over a canal. And I could see every lounge and I was scouring everywhere to see, were people watching Doctor Who? Were people watching the big relaunch of Doctor Who? I wanted it to succeed. I wanted it to work. I was intrigued how it would work because I knew the episodic thing had dropped, you know, my old chestnut. But basically, yeah, where were you on that day? I was aware, would we beat Ant and Dec? Could we do that? Could Doctor Who be that powerful on a Saturday night again? We're going to look at that. I've got my good old regular panelists here, so you'll see them all. But the other thing we will discuss within our criterion, all the usual stuff that you know and love, we will be talking about whether it was sowing some seeds for later. And it actually, now in reflection, in retrospect, when we look at it, were there some issues that should have been picked up then? And were there good promises then of what was to come with RTD and RTD2? So obviously, no further ado, I need to bring everybody on. I've got to remember one thing. I'm always maximized and I always forget to do this. So when I bring Michelle on, hello, Michelle, how are you?
Hello, I'm good.
I think you might finish that book one day.
Eventually.
Well, it's a TARDIS book. You've got a TARDIS top on, so I think, and you've got a TARDIS in the background. I think you like TARDISes.
I do like my TARDIS.
I do agree with you as well. I do like my TARDISes. Where is he? He's here. Hello. Have you had a good Easter, John and Elsie?
Yes, Elsie's here too. Yeah, very good Easter.
Oh, hi, Elsie.
Elsie's here. Findlay's down here too, but he doesn't want to stick his head up yet. He may appear later. Yes, we've all had our eggs, our bunnies, and are feeling suitably sated, if not a bit queasy.
I didn't. Did you get my Easter egg?
I did. I sat on it. Nothing happened.
Yeah, there was nothing else on it. And he's back again. Hello, Hugh. I hope you're still well.
Yeah, progressing. Slower than I'd like, but progressing.
Good. Well, that's what we want to hear. And it's really good to keep you coming back and being a regular. Thank you. And of course, somewhere here, let's have a look. Good old Noel. Hiya, Noel. Happy Easter.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, happy Easter. Hope everybody had a good Easter. Quiet.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes they're the ones you want, really, aren't they?
That's the one.
That's the one. So, of course, you know where we're going with this straight away. I need to start us off with, of course, where we all stand with the scores on the sarcophagus doors. Why have I picked a sarcophagus? There you go. John, something happened last week. Once you were threatened with -10, you went for it big time.
Yes, I'm back where I belong, I see.
That's it, yeah. See how long this lasts, because Michelle was the front runner before. Hugh's looking at this going, well, when do I get a chance? But I think, and timescales will be back later, so he's probably going to stay on nil silch at the moment. What can I do? So, okay. Who wants to go first? I have to be fair, because nobody thinks I'm leading it then. Does anyone want to go first? Does anyone fancy a number? Because I don't.
I think ladies should go first always.
Is this the only time that it doesn't sound gentlemanly when we offer this kind of thing?
Wow. No, being genuine.
I know. But right. Are you happy with that, Michelle?
That's fine.
Okay, here we go then. I'll put it big screen first.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's okay.
All I've done differently this time is instead of going very kind of microscopic and then I pull out, which has been problematic in some ways, I suppose.
Very.
I've taken parts of the picture, so
Right.
they all add up.
Okay.
I'm still no terrible at this, right? Okay, so here we go. So Michelle, for 3 points. Now, just to help you, Michelle, they're all opening stories of seasons. Because we're looking at Rose, these are all opening stories of seasons in Doctor Who. So a bit of help.
My first guess would have been School Reunion, but that's not an opener.
I can see why you said School Reunion, Michelle. That these look like lockers, don't they?
I think I know what this is.
Smith and Jones?
No.
It's not, and I'll bring you in no when we get to 1 point, but it's good that you've got one. So let's go down to 2. So these are in the same shot, Michelle.
Terror of the Autons.
Yeah.
We're in, we're off and running. Was that what you were going to say, Noel?
Yes. Well done,
Oh,
Michelle.
you'll get one. So, right. So
It's
I'm
the
adding up there.
Caravan Park. See, I'm using the right language. It's the Caravan Park.
Yes, and there was the doctor's jacket because it's such a distinctive, iconic photograph,
Yes,
isn't
yeah.
it? And then, of course, there they are. So Crimpling got it. I saw Crimpling got it. And
Yes.
so who's second? Who wants to go second?
I'll go.
Okay, John. So there's no Swiss here. Here we go. So for three points.
This is a Swiss.
The opening stories to seasons.
Could this be, because it looks a bit garish, is it, I was going to opening stories for doctors and opening stories for seasons. I was going to say Twin Dilemma, but that's not an opening story of a season. Is it
You see
Time
why
and
you
the
think that? It's got that sort of colouring, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is it Time and the Rani?
I think that you're in the. I know that you get you the time period. We know what the 80s were like, don't we?
Yeah.
So do you want to duck down to 2?
Go on.
Both in the same shot.
What is that?
Well,
Some
exactly.
sort of plant thing?
Let me
That
go
looks like
bigger
a
for you.
footprint. Is it Attack of the Cybermen?
No. It's all right. It's all right. I mean, yeah. Right.
Oh,
So you've
of course, it's the Leisure Hive.
the Leisure Hive, and I know you were right. It was that modern 80s
It
period
was
that we had.
very 80s, very garish, yes.
Yes. So there you go, John.
Was that a bit of Tom's beard?
No, I didn't do. I did the scarf because the scarf changed, obviously.
No, I
then.
mean, the second one, Brendan, was that Tom's
Sorry.
beard?
No, if I show you it back, it
that
was
scarf too.
it was the Formosa.
Formazi, yeah, was it? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Being kind, I would have put the I in, then we might have got it.
Oh,
Never
right.
mind.
You know what you're
Never
doing,
mind. I'm
John?
not
You're
bitter.
making it. John, you made a mistake there. You put kind and me in the same line. I know.
I'll settle for one.
So, who would like to go third?
Happy to.
Okay, then Hugh. You know the standard here. I'm a swine. Okay, here we go. Now, it's.
I
I'm
know
gonna,
where you are.
So that almost looks like the first picture that Michelle got, but with the window in.
yes, I know it does. It's the same colouring.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because it's blurred. I tried my best, but it
Yeah.
seems.
No,
it's
I'm
in the-
not. I'm sort of, simply because of the colouring. I'm around the same time, but
Yeah.
not sure.
Okay, we'll go for 2, and hopefully this will help. So it's another part of the shot.
Oh,
So for those in the thread, this is opening stories to seasons, since we're going to do a few reviews of opening stories. So obviously that looks like a bit of a costume or something.
all right. Well, it's a bit like. Could that be Jodie's coat?
I suppose it could.
Or is no next?
Okie doke.
The hell's that?
Is it horror at McDonald's? But everything turned sideways.
It looks like what they used to take the dog's temperature at the vet.
Yes.
You'll kick yourselves. Does anyone know this one?
Hold on. I'm getting vibes.
All right.
Is it Smith and Jones?
Let's see.
Thank
There you go.
you.
Of course, yeah. Uh-huh.
Smith and Jones. There you go. John's on form. Okay, so that leaves us with Noel. Are you feeling nice and warmed up now, Noel?
Yeah, brilliant. Can't wait for this one.
Here we go. Here we go then. So I'll go big. It's an opening season. I'll help you. It's classic.
Oh,
Oh.
I have a feeling I know what this is too.
I feel yes. I think I'm getting vibes.
Are you sure it's not gas?
No, the gas will come later.
yum.
Trying to try two, Noel.
Yes, please.
Okay, doke.
Why not?
Same shot. Now I'll go bigger because that's what's going on there with that, you know. Somebody Crimpling says smugglers. We've got people trying to help you out here, but that's the guesses so far.
Right, hold on now. No, I
Don't
don't
worry.
have it.
Right. Okay, then. Does that help any more? Same picture.
Yes. Crimpling got it.
Mm-hmm.
Look in the chat, Brendan.
I know.
Cheat. Look in the chat.
I can see. Go on, no.
No, look in the chat. Sorry, I said Brendan. No,
Look in the chat. That's cheating though. I don't
Honourable
cheat.
man.
I don't cheat. So like, if
Okay,
someone
don't
got
look
it
in
in
the
the
chat.
chat, I could see the chat, and it won't be fair if I answer that. Then I'm taking
No.
someone else's answer. So I'm gonna pass.
Do you want me to look for you?
No, it's good. I'll pass it. I'll be fair. I'll pass it. Go on, because it's only fair. So
Well, I've seen now. I know. I think the new. Is this an honesty box? Because Noel's been very honest. So
I give no the honesty point.
yeah.
no, it's good. It's good. Seriously, I get what you're doing, but if fair
I
is
think-
fair, it popped in the chat,
I
so
think
I
no,
can't
you would have
answer.
got, but you would have got it on that last point based on those little.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So there you go. It was just.
Yeah.
I thought a different version of doing that was to actually look.
Actually, that was good though. That was actually good. I enjoyed that.
But don't let it go to your head. It was better, but it's still pretty awful.
Well,
Yeah, no, I think those were good. I like that way of doing it, Brendan.
Me too.
Well-
I agree.
as in the part of it. Yeah.
That's the part, yeah, because I think it gives you a bit more to put together than
Yes.
sort of like, especially sometimes whenever you pull out and it looks exactly the same, but just
Usually
wider.
on my one.
Yes.
Yes.
That's really good info.
How did he guess that? I mean, I don't know. I have to be a medium and think, will he go first, second? No. So just to remind everybody before we go on, we've done very well, and here's a contact details of how to grab our channel. Of course, they're all there. And the other thing I wanted to kind of remind everybody of before we move on is to say a massive thank you, because I asked if we could target 200 subscribers, and suddenly there was a flurry, and I'm also appreciative of those who've been subscribing for a long time. But yes, we hit that, and that was good. The channel needs to grow. So well done, everybody. Well done, the subscribers, for sticking with us. Thanks to the panelists, because we've been there from the beginning. And just to remind you, if you've just joined us for the first or second time, we do Sundays at 7, Tuesdays at 4, and we've got a whole package of material there, reviews and debates going way back now, about 40 shows. And just before I get going, so I don't spoil it too much, just to remind you that there's There is a Wednesday show though this week because we want to give our version of the trailer breakdown. So please join us for that. But this show is one of our classic reviews. And of course, we've gone for Rose, the review of that, the reboot that actually succeeded. I was trying to say to some people on Facebook, this was the full relaunch because it actually worked rather than disappeared. So, we always start, don't we, ladies and gentlemen, with the burning issues, what you found possibly problematic with this iteration. So let's roll the dice. I like that drama. Right, okay, so I'm going to sit back for a moment. I'm going to go Mr. Mysterious for a second there. Michelle, we seem to be doing ladies first. So was there anything? I know you texted me earlier and you said, oh, I quite enjoyed watching that Rose again. But was there anything in it where you thought,
This is hard because, again, this is one of the few rewatching back is like, okay, this is really fun. This is enjoyable. You can see where the show was fresh and different. And it actually has aged well. I mean, let's leave the special effects out of it. One area you can say, looking back, is the soap opera issue. You're starting to see it was filmed very much like a soap opera. The kind of realistic lighting, which gives it a fresh feel. But going back in time, you can say, okay, maybe we can start seeing some of the soap opera dynamics being built in that over time maybe was not as a deft hand could cause problems down the line. So I'll go that direction.
Interesting, and we may develop that later, but as our opening gambits, I might come back in a moment. Hugh, where would you go if you need to on any bones of contention?
Yeah, so I'm very similar to Michelle in the sense that I think watching it is it's still very good. It's probably one of the stories I've watched most of New Who simply because of it being the first and getting the DVD at the time and stuff. So yeah. I've seen it a number of times, and I say probably one of the most of New Who. I think in part because of the need for a fairly small plot. My objection is he starts killing things very quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
Or things get killed very quickly because it's not actually the Doctor, but that seems to be sort of like, I can understand it, but it does seem a bit off-putting.
Okay, John, where would you like to take us? I'm making notes so we can develop these later. But yeah,
I haven't watched this in about 15 years. There's just so much Doctor Who out there, and there isn't enough hours in the day to watch everything again and again and again. So myself and George, my husband, sat down to watch this last night, and we both completely 100% loved it, absolutely loved it. And he reminded me of something I said at the time when we watched this almost 20 years ago now. He said, can you remember what you said? And I said, oh, tell me. He said, my goodness, this is fast. And that's what I said, apparently, was the speed of things compared to Doctor Who we had been used to, albeit not for some time. This was very, very fast compared to it. If I was to pick one burning, I might discuss that going forward, but if I was to pick one burning issue, which I think spoiled it for me ever so slightly, was not enough Autons. Because I think they did a really good job in recreating the Autons and giving us that whole street invasion scene that we got in Spearhead and the ability to do things that they weren't able to do then. I just would have liked a bit more of it. But for what we got, it was great.
Yeah. I mean, everything that's been mentioned, we will revisit big time. And Autons was a section I wanted to look at because it was very interesting how they brought them back. Noel, where would you like to go with a bone of contention with this?
I don't have one.
Really?
Honestly, I don't have one. This episode, this actual episode holds a special place in my heart, I have to say. You're going to be surprised today because this is the day that you're going to really find out how much I love Doctor Who. RTD saved my life with this story. I won't get into it. I don't want to go down that route, but I'll be always forever thankful for RTD rebooting Doctor Who. I don't have a bone of contention. I actually enjoyed everything. I know Daniel brought up the burp and bin. Yeah, it was. It didn't fit the tone, but I like that. I thought that was funny. I did. Even when Mickey gets back into the taxi and you can clearly see that he's a dummy, right? But Rose is not paying attention because she's so self-absorbed, you know. But I love everything about this story. I really do. I love the chemistry between the two. So I've no bone of contention. Actually, the one that I probably have it was they could have probably done an hour for the opening episode rather than the 40 odd minutes that we got. Very, very good. I love those two. One of the best dynamics in New Who era. Got to say, I've nothing but great things to say about this episode. And I agree with Michelle. Forget about the special effects. When you watch this, John is right. It is fast, but at the same time, it has. We'll get into it a bit more. I'm not going to criticize this episode today. So there you go.
Well, I watched it. I liked it the first time round. I was pleased Doctor Who was back. As John said, for example, it was fast paced and it seemed modern. It seemed modern at last. You know, Doctor Who looked with the times. And I listed loads of things from the domestic situation of Rose, our key character in this episode. All the rest of it was all nicely set up and it did feel very 2005. And I was pleased because sometimes Doctor Who didn't feel like it was contemporary. It was interesting that Noel Clarke has since said that he felt misdirected in this one episode because he said tonally he wasn't sure whether he should be playing comedic or more serious. And I think this is one thing I would pick up as a bone of contention, which is I was trying to work out what this production crew were trying to do with this episode, whether going for humor or whether going a bit more dramatic. And I think it fell in some places, and maybe that's why Daniel said the burping bin, for example, which is fine, I know. But I could see how Noel Clarke was acting it, and I think there's a few things that he would prefer to change.
Let's not forget the fact that the makeup people put Noel Clarke in very shiny and very plastic looking wig and makeup. It probably required the performance he gave it, plus with the repetition and the stuttering and the stammering that his duplicate was required to do. This is very much a series still looking for a tone. I don't think any of them knew exactly how to play it at that point. And since then we've discovered there was an awful lot of disagreement between members of the production team, between the production team and the actors as well regarding how to play this. But I don't think we can fault them on that because this is episode one, story one.
Exactly.
Every show goes through a gestation period before it hits its stride. I think the best thing we can say about this is that it captures absolutely what Doctor Who should be about very quickly. While it's not the Doctor Who that went before, and it's not the Doctor Who that it ultimately became, it's still very much Doctor Who. And I sat back there that evening and 19 years on, watching it again for the first time in 15 years, knowing this is very definitely Doctor Who, which a whole lot of the previous output of the last 4 or 5 years most certainly wasn't.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is interesting to compare. Now, can I just elaborate on one burning issue for myself, and then we'll come back to some of yours, and then we'll obviously move on. So, one thing I haven't mentioned yet, apart from the tonal, and as I was going to say, and John's right, that the production team were finding their way. This is what was going on here, and we understand that. But the point I was going to make is, the end scene, really, when the doctor's got the TARDIS door open, and he offers Rose a trip. She kind of says no. You could tell she was pained, and then he landed again and said, by the way, I can travel in time as well. He did a persuasive piece on her. He did persuade her to go. And what I was intrigued by, if to be honest, is the Doctor's companions have either accidentally taken off, they've been stowaways, they have actually formally asked to join the crew. But I found it interesting in how Doctor Who has proceeded since this episode, that you have the Doctor, who we all know is 900, 1,000, 1100 years old, and we all did our popular program about sex in the TARDIS and relationships. And I found it fascinating that he was doing a persuasion job on her. And I think that has become more problematic as time has gone on. Not for this episode per se, but I think it was a change. If you go back to Barbara and Ian stuck in the TARDIS, they had no chance of escape. I just find that fascinating. Does anyone else pick up on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think
Terror of the Zygons, the Doctor actively encourages Sarah to come back on board.
and I think it's actually trying to do something to avoid that for once, which is asking permission, rather than. I think it would be just as, if not more problematic, if she'd accidentally ended up in the TARDIS without giving consent. And I think that last scene where she is actively and looks completely happy to be doing it works. I think it's only with the benefit of what happens afterwards. I think for the episode itself, it's perfectly right.
Yeah, she's a
And
willing.
we're supposed to be
willing
Rose. We're
participant.
supposed to be running towards the TARDIS to get on this adventure.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're supposed to be in this moment of adventure.
It also shows how selfish Rose is as well, though, because, you know, it's not until he mentions time that she decides to jump on. But he didn't have to persuade her, because when she turned him down the first time, you could clearly see she wanted to get on the TARDIS. She just didn't want to leave Mickey, but then she decided then that second time that she was going to go anyway. But Sylvester McCoy's Doctor was very manipulating as well and persuasive, got his companions. So this is not a new trait. This is a trait that's been in Doctor Who before, and I agree with you. I think it was very well done this time around. Rather than get the companion to ask permission to come on, you know, it's him doing the persuading. I mean, look. Yeah.
Do you remember? No. Do you remember that the leading up to this, the trailers were all about, do you want to come on board? Do you want to join this journey?
Yeah.
The Doctor's inviting the viewer to join him, and or I think it's Rose does that. So this is very much in keeping with the invitation to viewers to join this series of adventures. And I think tonally, it's setting up that for all Rose is about to find herself in a whole series of dangers. She's a willing participant. She hasn't stowed away. She hasn't been tricked into joining. She didn't stumble upon it Tegan style. It's very much her decision. There was an offer made, but she was free to turn it down as much as she was free to take it. And it's only when she discovers that the TARDIS is also a time machine, she agrees to join, not because she can go back in time, but because she can come back at the same time, I would imagine, and therefore wouldn't have known she was missing. And we all know that goes a bit belly up later on. But Brendan, as I said at the start, remember, Sarah Jane Smith at the end of Terror of the Zygons agrees to come with the Doctor upon the offer in the same way that the Brigadier and Harry choose not to.
I agree. The only one difference, you're right, but the one difference is Sarah travelled with him before, so she kind of knew the terrain, so to speak.
He does the same at the beginning of Robot as well, so it's a pattern with the fourth Doctor, you know.
But look what Rose goes through in that very first episode. You know what I mean? By the time she gets at the scene at the TARDIS, she's already been through an awful lot with the Doctor already. She's seen things that she never imagined she'd see. Yes. So your curiosity is piqued after that. She obviously wanted to go in there. You could tell even by that scene that she wanted to get into the TARDIS the first time, but Mickey grabbed onto her, you see. And then then some instinct kicked in, which we find out later on in Father's Day then. She kind of imposed herself on baby Mickey. Remember, Mickey was in the playground playing with the Switch. Like, she imposed herself, you know what I mean? So Mickey kind of attached to her even as a kid. So you can understand this scene when you look at Father's Day. So she wanted to get into the TARDIS, but she felt like she had a duty to Mickey. But then...
And also the Doctor, I think the Doctor realises, having spent the last few hours, realising that this woman is more than capable of being able to join in these travels. It's not some random person. She has auditioned very well.
Yeah.
Yes, because and we'll come to it. You know how we're with the dialogue doctors. There's a piece of dialogue that we all know. It's a really good bit in this story, and we'll come to that a bit later.
So it's kind of hard to find faults with this story, Brendan. Because You
Let
know,
me just say it's a moot point, though. No, I know what you're saying, but the point is, I will always pick at everything because I want to be objective across every episode we ever look
Because
at.
you're picky.
I am picky, but I will say this before I move on and talk: is the Doctor goes mad with the Time Meddler for meddling. He goes mad with the Rani for meddling, and actually, he does actually persuade a companion to travel in time, which means a human 19-year-old changing time, seeing things that is beyond her capacity as somebody from the modern era. Do you know what I mean? I know companions have always faced this problem, but the point is he normally goes mad with his enemies for dabbling with time and actually, like in the Time Warrior, teaching humans beyond their capacity at that time. It was the same in the City of Death. And so I am actually saying it's one of those problematic things that when he's persuaded her rather than somebody stored away.
This
But
is a different Doctor.
I don't think it's new to the
Also,
program.
the Time War.
yeah.
Go on,
The Time War. He's lost everything. This is a new Doctor who thinks he is the last of his peoples, and so this is a new era, a new Doctor that is at this point he doesn't remember that he stopped.
he needs someone as well. This Doctor,
the destruction of Galfrey. So he's completely now, a new man, whatever now at this point.
And I think the thing where he's asking, and she says, is it as dangerous as all this, is crucial in terms of saying, yes, this is something I accept. And all the other times, whenever, I mean, starting off with Ian and Barbara, where they're effectively taken away because he hasn't been honest and he isn't honest with them. I think this is, a contract that he's offered on, and it's a contract that he fulfills.
Yeah. Okay, then. So you know where we go with this. We will dig into criteria 1, which is, and let's have a look. I'll just remind people who are new to us.
Time Scales is in the studio there, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks. I'll bring him on in a second. I'll just remind our viewers of this one. So criterion 1, safeguarding of the programme. It's up to the panellists how they judge this within the wording of safeguarding. Is it canon being broken or consistency of character broken or something like that? Is it recognisable Doctor Who? They judge it on this, but this is where we come up with our judgments at the end. We don't just kind of go on about the episode and just pick whatever. We do try and stick to these. So, I'll just take this off again. So there we go. Criterion 1. I'll say welcome to Timescales, who was always going to join us. Hi, Timescales.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're just going to get into criteria 1. So I know you'll join us as we go. I'll first of all, so canon, safeguarding, the lot. This time I'll start with Hugh. Hugh, where would you want to go with this one? Does it follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, it's obviously doing something new, and you get the hints of the Time War, you get the hints of a slight change in personality or approach because of the speed, I think, as much as anything else. But I think, as everyone has said up to now, it's recognisably, for those of us who'd watched it, Doctor Who. It's, Eccleston is brilliant in it.
Yeah,
and I think the whole thing with the tonal aspect is, I can imagine that to an extent what Russell Davies was trying to do is pack in different tones, because he's going to hit different tones in the series, and therefore put them in whenever they might not necessarily gel, but they're there for future reference. I think that works really well, and I think Eccleston's the one that gets it right. Stuff like, so in terms of the characterization of Rose, I think it's brilliant, apart from the time where she flips between worrying about Mickey being dead and then suddenly being excited by solving the problem. But again, I think that's all to do with packing stuff in. I agree with Noel, if this had been an hour, or it might have been even better. But no, I think in terms of what it's doing, the characterization is there, and the two ones you have to get right are the Doctor and Rose, and they're pretty damn perfect.
Well, Timescales, I might as well say welcome and bring you in. I mean, on judging on this one, how would you say, did this feel like Doctor Who, this episode?
Well, thank you, Brendan. Yeah, absolutely felt like Doctor Who. And I was very surprised because of the 16-year gap where we didn't have Doctor Who, aside from the television movie, of course. And I was terribly afraid that it was going to get messed up. I had trouble believing that Doctor Who was going to come back. And I was afraid that it was going to come back in such a different form that it was only temporary. I thought that it might be back for maybe one season or something like that. And then that would really put the nail in the coffin right there. I was very skeptical of it. I hadn't heard of any of the actors or the showrunner or anything like that, which is not unusual for an American. I've never heard of any of the actors that have portrayed the Doctor or the companions until seeing them on Doctor Who. But yes, as far as canon, absolutely 100% canon. And it felt so much like real authentic Doctor Who to me that I got a little bit choked up by it, to be honest. I was so happy that it was back, and it really was Doctor Who.
And he did bits like that. I love the original dematerialization sound, and you got it in Rose. You really got it. And I love that moment. I've counted. It was it was where was it? Oh, 7 minutes into the episode, she runs after a TARDIS in the shadow, and you get that spooky sound that this is Doctor Who. There's the TARDIS. There were loads of touches like that where I thought, oh, they're introducing all these little clues that this is magical stuff. Michelle, where would you go with this?
I think it's very safeguarding of the canon. He creates new canon, but it's still consistently Doctor Who. You recognize it. You recognize the feelings and this is Doctor Who. I love when you see the TARDIS for the first time and you hear just the little opening strains of the Doctor's theme. This idea that yes, this and I'm sure for because again I saw this after watching some of the Capaldi episodes. It must have been a relief for you guys when you first heard the TARDIS for the first time, and it's the sound. It's not some new newfangled thing. You're seeing the TARDIS is recognizably the TARDIS. So I imagine that must have been a relief when you're seeing the opening scenes of Doctor Who and you see the TARDIS swinging by. I mean, that had to have been an amazing feeling that Doctor Who was back. Again, I think it does a very good job of establishing itself as Doctor Who. You feel like you're in the safe, warm cocoon.
Yeah, well, you've just added that the music at the beginning. I thought it's the theme tune, and I love the additional bit. We had the tunnel sequence. All of that was just tick, 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 tick. John, was this the Doctor Who you'd been waiting for?
Yeah, I spent all of the 16 years, apart from a little bit with McGann, telling people the Doctor Who would come back. A lot of people who thought Doctor Who was in the dustbin of history would never come back. I maintained the fact that it always would. I just know you can't keep a good idea like Doctor Who down. It will come back. All it was going to take was someone with the time, the energy, the inclination to realise that Russell Davies was that man, and to get the BBC interested enough, because that was the major problem with Doctor Who. There was no real interest from the BBC. Once he managed to get around to a cabal of people who were willing to do that and follow him, then we were on to gold, because they were going to make sure that this worked. Because I think those who weren't in the loop, if you like, in the industry, were willing this to fail, because they also, no, why Doctor Who? Surely not, for goodness sake. Why would someone like Russell Davies, very much the rising star at the time, hitch his caravan to this failure? So they absolutely wanted to invest this and make it work. And the only way you can do that is by making it recognisably Doctor Who. And that's what they did. So we had the theme tune, the time tunnel, as you said, Brendan, and the TARDIS, dematerialisation, all sort of layered onto the programme very early on before we even get introduced to the Doctor. Is this recognisably Doctor Who? Absolutely is. It's almost as if you could imagine the Sylvester McCoy Doctor and Ace landing there, getting out and almost recommencing their adventures. That's how well it's segued. We take the McGann side out of this, but that's how well it's segued from original Doctor Who, because original Doctor Who was heading in this general direction. Of that fact, there's no doubt. And so you think it's almost as if the Doctor could have come out the TARDIS and said, right, where was I? And off they go on the adventure again. This is so Doctor Who. And it had to be in order to succeed. Otherwise, they may as well have just created a different franchise or program altogether.
You can certainly see where Russell Davies, his go-to episodes, you can see he did love the Ace character. You can tell that, and that's exactly what you're saying, John, that you can see he picked it up perfectly. Noel, I need to bring you in because obviously you haven't had a go with this round, but on this safeguarding, I know you're not going to knock this episode, but it's your free reign to tell us what you really loved about it, of course.
I think what RTD done in 2005 is what he's going to fail to do this time around. But this, as I said, this story, this for me, everybody has kind of said everything that I wanted to say on the panel. I mean, this was just the perfect introduction for not just classic fans to reconnect with Doctor Who, but it did bring in a flood of new fans, and I think RTD was very good at doing that. And the reason why that happened was because the element that people are worried about was the drama, the soap opera. He had to kind of do that for modern Who to work, because you couldn't just do it the way you did it back in the classic days, and I mean the early classic days. It wouldn't have worked. And as someone rightly, I think it was John there, said on the panel, you could see that it was going in that direction at the late 80s anyway. And if Ace and Sylvester McCoy's Doctor did step out, have known any difference. My favourite scene in this is actually when he grabs Rose's hand and he explains to her about how the Earth is spinning. That's when I knew Doctor Who was back. That was the scene for me that Doctor Who was back. It does everything. It safeguards canon, adds to canon, as Michelle says. This doesn't work without Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper, though. I mean, the chemistry between those two sold this straight away. And you could tell that they had that chemistry. And I don't think if they had that chemistry, this would have worked as well. But it absolutely did. Listen, you know, the CGI hasn't aged well. But for me, that gives it more of a classic feel, believe it or not. It makes it feel like classic Who to me. I just adore this episode. This was listen, you know, it's not the most complicated story, right? But it doesn't need to be. No. It didn't need to be. That was the thing. And RTD, look, no matter what my feelings of the man are now, back then, that man saved my life bringing this show back. I wouldn't be here talking to you today if it wasn't for that episode, if it wasn't for that trailer. If I hadn't saw that trailer, I mean, that trailer still, to me, is one of the best trailers that was ever put out there for Doctor Who. It is absolutely amazing. John is right. We were taken on a journey, that episode, right? And then that whole season, that whole era, we were taken on a journey. And I'd love to relive it.
Planned it so well, didn't he? He planned that trailer. He knew what he wanted in the trailer. He knew what he wanted to sell. You could see his 13-episode plan that he sold to the BBC.
Yeah.
It was a masterstroke. It was. He really did know his stuff, and he really did know how to kind of hit all the Doctor Who buttons from history to future. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And this was him top of his game. We'll have an interesting question later in this program about whether we think he's hitting the same buttons again. Go on, John.
Just saying that trailer, Brendan, as Noel quite rightly says, that trailer was an invitation to us in the same way that he made an invitation to Rose.
Yeah.
Join me on this adventure. And as each new companion was new to the Doctor, most of the audience would have been new to the concept. Certainly the children's audience, which Doctor Who always has to have in order to get the mums and dads on the seats as well, make this the family experience that it has to be. Would have not heard of Doctor Who apart from maybe from the mums and dads that were sitting there. They probably didn't know what they were going to get, but based on that trailer, there was the invitation. Stick with this, stick with me. It's going to be a rollicking adventure. And it sure was.
It was, and it was a bit, I mean, you know, we'd been quiet about being Doctor Who fans. I was teaching then in Birmingham, and I told my year 7 class, so to the Americans, like, I don't know if it's different, 11 years old. And in my English class, I started mentioning Doctor Who, and they didn't know what the hell it was. And I said, you must see this. Please watch the first episode. I was thinking it better be good. And I mentioned Davros, and I mentioned various iconic characters, and their interest was piqued. And I just kept thinking, this could really fall flat if I've hyped this up. But they all came back. And actually, a lot of them, well, when I say a lot of them, some contact me now and still say, we remember you selling Doctor Who to us, and you were right, and we loved it. Now they're in their late 30s. But I remember
parents, yeah, they're the parents.
Or early 30s. Yeah. Oh, no, yeah, it was absolutely amazing. So, can we just mention then, since we're happy with this episode, it sounds like, on the safeguarding, and it was proper Doctor Who, and it felt like it. Can we mention the first moment of jeopardy? Because actually watching it again today, the moment when Rose goes looking for the man who does the lottery money and all the rest of it, that whole basement setup, I was surprised how long it was in the end. And I thought, thank God, because I've been moaning in the giggle that the puppets were great, but they were only in it for a minute and a half or something. But this whole sequence I loved, and it was so creepy. This was Doctor Who, and even the Autons plasticky kind of stretchy sound. Mind you, John, what did you think? When we discuss the Autons later, John, I think one mistake was I kind of fancied these Autons. That's not the way to go. They look too good.
Can we just remind you, Brendan, Autons are plastic, not rubber. Okay, so you can put your predilections away. You know what? Yes, the Autons certainly looked a whole lot better and masculine than they had ever done before. You're spot on about that opening scene where Rose goes downstairs. That, again, it's all part and parcel of, is this Doctor Who?
Oh. Yeah.
And within 5 or 6 minutes of this program, in fact, even 5 or 6 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes of this thing starting, we're already scaring the so-and-sos. Because that scene was probably scarier than anything else that had been on television at that time of night since Doctor Who was last on a Saturday. And that's exactly so. Doctor Who was putting its reason for being out there.
Yeah.
Scare you. And that whole business of calling out for Wilson, named and presumably after Donald Wilson, who never gets the credit he had for creating Doctor Who, right at the start, and Rose being on her own. You're quite right. Keith Boak has taken a lot of flack for being a director who perhaps didn't get Doctor Who and made a lot of wrong choices. But in this, he makes all the right choices. You're right. It's given the time it needs to breathe, the tension's allowed to build, and the Autons are allowed to be what they should be, scary. And it's just a shame that later on, the Autons and New Who became a bit meh.
Yeah. I mean, you had the chase sequence, you had the lift sequence, you had the run, the classic. It was mentioned by Noel earlier. You know, run, and that goes back to Troughton, doesn't it? Run. When I say run. All that element there, I love.
Basically, writing down what the program's of MO is within those first few minutes, isn't it? You're going to be running from things from now on, Rose. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that they were well realised, I have to say. I mean, there you go. That they're chasing them down there, and this was about 5 minutes into the story.
6-pack.
There you go. Good models these were. But yeah, I was really pleased with this scene when I watched it again today, and I did think it creeped you out, and it worked. Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me when Sarah Jane Smith landed in Time Warrior, and landed in medieval past, and she kind of said, accused all the peasants of being, is this university ragweek or something? And again, you had that clever bit of, who's going to buy into this, that you're in history suddenly? No, you wouldn't. And she is not saying, oh, I'm in a Doctor Who episode, oh, I should be freaked out. She's going, oh, wait, it's a joke, come on, stupid. She said to the Doctor.
That also, Brendan, allows the Doctor to make a judgment on Rose just as he meets her, because she's able to rationalise that decision and why she makes it, because to do something like that's going to take a bit of organisation, take force of numbers. And the Doctor clicks, he already makes a decision about this woman he's just met. She's clever, she's smart.
Yeah, totally. It was a good episode for testing her out.
And isn't the students thing an echo of Spearhead from Space?
It might be a few.
The policeman thinks they're students.
Yes, yeah.
So there are things there, and again, it's one of those things in terms of canon which we complained about in terms of the power of the Doctor, is you get hit over the head with cannon. It's actually like standing in front of a cannon quite often. But what you've got with that is the nods to the fans like us, but they don't matter to the casual viewer because it's not. It doesn't mean it. It doesn't. It means something. It's enough double written so that you get the view of John, and you can also go, oh, isn't that a bit like that? And that works really well.
I mean, does anyone want to come in on the first moment of jeopardy in New Who? Was it well realized? Did it set the template for you? How did you feel about it?
No, it was horrifying. And it was just a very in-your-face reminder that this is Doctor Who and it's back. Very, very well done.
This morning when I was watching it, I had to just put it on, and my dad came down and missed the first the first opening bit. But when the jeopardy of the Autons scene started increasing, my dad stopped whatever he was doing texting and actually started watching the episode with me. So
now, suppose we seem to have bought into the jeopardy thing. So RTD got it going. We like this episode overall. What about your first introduction to the TARDIS interior? Was this what you were? I have to say, it wowed me. The coral effect wowed me. I love the kind of, Moffat did it later by saying it was the wallpapers changed and all, desktop wallpaper. Very neat dialogue, that. But I was really impressed with the TARDIS. I didn't know what to expect, and I was wowed. What about everybody here about seeing your TARDIS at last? Because you sometimes worry what they might do with it.
It was, this, strangely, is not my favourite TARDIS. It just looks a bit too dirty for my liking, a bit too grubby. I prefer a white TARDIS, or the Capaldi TARDIS is although not white, is a favourite of mine. I liked it. It's just not amongst my favourite, but I can understand why it had to look different, why it had to be changed. It had to be modern, but in a sort of different from the old style series, which was very much a three-walled set in an electronic studio. So they could do something different with it. And I think to that extent, it works very, very well. But it's just not among my favourites. And for me, is one of the most disappointing elements of the reboot, although still not disappointing enough to put me off.
So John, before I bring anyone else in, John, just on this, because I was interested in your point. When you say, I know what you mean, you prefer a whiter console, the classic Five Doctors kind of period, I suppose you're saying, yeah? So as we're judging this TARDIS interior and what the designer's done, are you kind of happy where we've gone with Shooty's TARDIS, for example?
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be white, and it just has to. I think this, for example, for a program or a reboot of a program which was adhering so strongly to everything that had gone before, this TARDIS interior bucked that trend, if you like. It was entirely different from what I expected. That's not to say I didn't like it, but I think they could have gone along a more traditional route and then veered off that, as they ultimately did later on with the Matt Smith TARDIS, which again was off the wall. But I prefer the Matt Smith TARDIS, the first Matt Smith TARDIS, to this TARDIS. There was just something a bit grubby and functional and maybe steampunk about this, which just didn't grab me. But yeah, I'm just one for a white TARDIS, and I do like the Shooty TARDIS very, very much.
Okay, who else, does anyone got strong preferences about this?
Again, I think sort of rewatching it, not at the time, but rewatching it, I quite liked it being like that because of the references, and it felt bashed a bit from that point of view, and that felt right. I'm with John in that it's not my favourite TARDIS, but I probably like it more than he does. I thought it worked really well, and I think Eccleston's character was a bit more bashed for narrative reasons, and I think the TARDIS was as well.
Anybody else? I mean, sorry, I'm just responding to something. So, anybody else on this one? Because Yes, I mean, it's not my favorite. It's not my least favorite. It's just it surprised me, I think, is the thing. It surprised me. So Doctor Who was still surprising. I was expecting, I suppose, a white console, I guess, or whether they were going to go down the McGann movie road. But yeah, this was. I found it interesting that the Jodie Whittaker TARDIS interior kind of, I think, tried to echo this, but it got it so wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that is a TARDIS interior I dislike.
Yes, there was just something completely wrong about how it looked. It just
Dreadful.
So, well, the TARDIS is there. We had the first moment of jeopardy. We've mentioned that the safeguarding's all right. So I suppose what I should lead us to is actually one area that I've just slightly revamped. But it's kind of certain bits, and Noel mentioned this. So Noel, if you give it a second, I'll come back to you on a piece of dialogue I think a lot of us really enjoyed. So let me have a look. Always having my fun with this. So if I went to you first then, Noel, I'll put it on the big screen so people can see it. This is what you were talking about that you really loved, wasn't it?
Yeah. I know. I absolutely love this scene because he's explaining it to her. There's the music in the background as he's talking. I can feel it, the turn of the earth, the ground beneath our feet, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. The entire planet is hurling around the sun. I mean, just everything about that. And then just end it with, now forget me, Rose Tyler. He knew exactly what he was doing there. And then he just walks off as he does. And then we hear the TARDIS dematerialize. So very well done. And then she's obviously running around the corner to see where it is. Listen, that's the scene there for me. And for a lot of people, it's the run scene, run, where he grabs her hand and says run. But this is the scene for me that reminded me of why I love Doctor Who. And it was certainly back after that, in my opinion. This episode, as I said, holds a special place in my heart. It's absolutely still to this day. I mean, that's probably the episode I've watched the most, if I'm being honest. Of the New Who era, I just keep going back to it and back to it all the time.
Noel,
well done.
I love this scene as well. I get it, but I'm going to ask you as a supplementary first. Why do you think you loved this bit so much, though? What made it really so good?
Because I think this was him obviously explaining to the audience, and obviously we're fans, so we kind of knew who the Doctor was. But this dialogue was actually for the newer fans, to be quite honest, the people that he wanted to draw in, just like his trailer drawed everybody. I mean, he had one chance to draw people in, and he succeeded with the trailer, and then he had to deliver. And this, in my opinion, is the scene that would have got a lot of the mainstream or the casual fans on board. This is the scene of the Doctor basically introducing himself to the audience and what it's like to be the Doctor. So the fact that he said he could feel the earth turn, a lot of people say, wow, that's, you know what I mean? So that's why I think it's so popular. It's one of the best scenes in the episode, got to be honest, personally speaking.
The dialogue's good, and I'll just say one thing before anybody else wants to come in. You don't have to discuss every slide, obviously, but I think a lot of people did like this scene. But one thing I noticed, and it happens in the hologram later in the series with Eccleston, is he suddenly just turns to her, and it's a brilliant shot. He just turns, so they're talking, and it's a 2-shot, and then suddenly he turns to her, and that's when he says, "That's who I am. Now forget me, Rose Tyler." And that, as you say, it just has that drama to it, that alien quality, and a sharpness. I have to say, one thing in Rose is the dialogue is quite sharp all the way through. There's a lot of argument.
Well, what's interesting about it is, though, Brendan, is the fact that it leaves Rose more curious and what more, same with the audience. same with the audience. So it was very cleverly done. What RTD, introducing Rose. It's a brainstorming idea to have the first episode about the companion rather than actually the doctor, and this was done deliberately. So when he says that to Rose, and then he says, "Forget me, Rose," and walks off, not only is she curious, but so is the casual viewer. All of a sudden, like, wow, I want to see more of this. So it was very cleverly done. One of the best scenes in it.
Anybody want to come back on that? I mean, have we missed something out on that one, or shall I move on to another one? It depends.
No, it just,
I think no.
Sorry, you only go.
Noel's right. It's about that invitation. Again, sort of like just one thing I'd pick up is that it concentrates on Rose, but she's still ordinary. She's not there for a mystery. She's not there because of something really confusing. She's there by accident. And that scene in the lift where she impresses him, and she impresses him all the way through, which is why he says it and why he does that.
Also shows that he has hidden depths, because you see him being silly and doctory in a silly way in the kitchen, where he's playing with the cards, he's reading the book, and he's reading the tabloids, going, well, she's an alien, and so you see the one side, he can be the wacky fun doctor, and now we're seeing that there's hidden depths, that this is a man, a old man in a young man's body, that he is and also been through stuff. So we just got the first hint of the Time War in this episode, and we get this idea that since the last time we've seen him, this man's been through something.
John,
no, just what you've everyone said is exactly it. You have to remember, we're reintroducing the whole concept of Doctor Who. An audience that hasn't seen it for years, or a completely new audience. And it's important we get this across, that this character is not your bog standard superhero.
Yeah.
He doesn't do that stuff. This isn't Doctor Who in terms of Captain Kirk or anybody from Star Wars or any of the Marvel superheroes that exist now. This is an alien. He's a bit of an oddball, loves humanity, but is clued into everything that goes on around him. And that whole turn of the earth thing exactly encapsulates who the Doctor is, that while he gives the impression that he's like us, he's apart from us, and he feels and emotes about things around us which us ordinary human beings don't get. And that's important to make that clear right at the start of this program, because it will affect the characterization of the Doctor, and also affect how we, as a viewer, or Rose as a companion, interact with him.
Exactly.
Now, as I come to timescales, I want to show another bit of dialogue, but you can refer to any of it really. But I just wanted to show this, for example. The head was melting, the plastic head was melting in the TARDIS of Mickey. Are you going to witter on all night? I'll have to tell his mother, Mickey. I'll have to tell his mother he's dead, and you just went and forgot him again. You were right. You are alien. If I did forget some kid called Mickey, he's not an idiot. It's because I'm trying to save every stupid ape blundering about on this planet. All right. Do you know what, timescales? I had a Pyramid of Mars moment. I had this kind of sense, Sarah arguing with the Doctor about things. The Donna Noble arguing with the Doctor in Fires of Pompeii. This is what you need. You need a fiery companion, somebody who's going to test him and challenge him. And yes, he's always going to do the Pyramids of Mars, but relatively, there's more people I'm trying to save. But, is this dialogue grabbing you, timescales?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just me. It seems to be the perfect way to introduce new viewers to Doctor Who. Now, all of us, I believe, are fans of the old series, and we all knew who the Doctor is when this came on. But it's introducing new people that might not have ever seen Doctor Who after it had been off television for 16 years. The interaction and the dialogue is perfect, and the fact that Rose all of a sudden fell into this situation and met the Doctor by accident is a really nice way to be able to imagine what it would be like to be her, and what it would be like to meet the Doctor, and what it would be like to learn about the Doctor and enter the TARDIS for the first time. And with this particular episode, I showed it to a good number of people. My brother had watched Doctor Who with me when we were younger, but he never really was as interested in it as I was. But with this one here, he got very interested in it and said, "This is the best episode of Doctor Who that I've ever seen." And in turn, I showed this episode, Rose, to all of my friends. And I was really pleased with the dialogue because I didn't have to explain it to them. It explained it well right out the gate. And I hate to feel like I'm in an echo chamber here, being just absolutely positive and congratulatory about this episode, but I loved it, and I think it's nearly perfect.
It deserves the plaudits though, because it does everything that RTD promised in that trailer. Like, you know, he said he was going to bring us on a journey. He was, you know, and that's exactly what he does in this first episode. It's look, for once, you know, I could talk positively about Doctor Who and have a huge smile on my face. And remember, you know, we went through the wilderness years. Our little show was mocked. You know, the fandom was mocked. This episode alone brought respectability back to Doctor Who as well. It was no longer seen from others out there that weren't necessarily fans. It wasn't seen as a joke anymore. It was actually taken seriously.
Do you know what? Do you know what, Noel? I'm totally agreeing with you, because there's elements of. I mean, I've got one element on the screen where the other famous moment is every planet has a north.
Yeah.
Just the sure-footed dialogue and the cleverness of RTD, he makes it very real. Suddenly, Doctor Who's not just this slightly aged Doctor Who, you know, show that the BBC delivers on a Saturday or whatever night, and some of the dialogue really isn't talking to everybody. This is quite modern, and this is really trying to say to people, I don't know, there's a reality to that. I mean, why the hell has no writer ever had this kind of discussion? Like, why have you got a northern accent? Well, every planet has a north. Next, this quickness. I have to say, his sure-footedness, I thought, continued with this very neat bit of dialogue when he explained the nesting consciousness. It loves the planet Earth at the moment because of the toxins, the dioxins, perfect, just what they need. That's the type of messaging I think that works. It leaves it to us. It just says, you know, we're a suitable planet for what's going on at the moment, but no laboured point. And I think that's the level where RTD really
precisely, Brendan. And the Doctor doesn't have to stop the action, turn to the screen, and let the viewers know for the best part of 90 seconds
exactly
what she's doing and what's happening and why it's happening and all this sort of stuff. The economy of dialogue, the economy of words that a skilled writer can use to get the message across is brilliant. Now, this isn't just a problem with the Chibnall area. You know, back in Saywood's 80s Doctor Who, human beings didn't speak like human beings. You know, some of the word choices, you can think, I wish to goodness I could think one off the top of my head. People talk about people being detained when people say, no, they've been arrested or whatever things. Just people didn't sound like human beings. What Russell Davies did was allow people to sound like real people. And that way we could invest in them, because unless we invest in the characters that are created, the jeopardy isn't going to mean anything. We just write. That's why most of the Chibnall era, and I hate to bring it back to this again, we don't care about what happens either to any ancillary characters, single story characters, or for that matter, the companions, because they're so flatly written. Russell Davies has a real skill, an economy of writing in which, even in those first 90 seconds, we get a whole sense of what Rose's life is like and why she would choose to join the Doctor without even a word of dialogue being spoken. And that's a really good writer knowing his craft.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to bring Hugh in. Hugh, just for this slide, I'm intrigued what you think of this, Hugh, this other bit of dialogue. I'm in my dressing gown. There's a strange man in my bedroom. Yeah, you are. Yep. There is. Well, anything could happen. Now, I am not stupid. It's called humor. It's called, it's called Jackie Tyler. The reason I mentioned it to you, Hugh, first is although we are rating this episode, it seems, I can see where this, as a nice cheeky point that landed, as it went through the series and 2 and 3 and 4, we started to get into a pickle because it was introducing an element of sex that wasn't really there in Doctor Who before.
Yeah, but the bit of that dialogue you've missed out is the finish, when he
Yes.
just goes, no.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's Jackie's presumption, and he just, and it's not as he doesn't say the no in the sense of that nothing's going to happen because I don't fancy you or whatever. It's nothing's going to happen because I'm me,
Yeah,
and I don't do that.
exactly.
So what you're in your dressing room. I am a strange man. I am in your bedroom, but I'm me, so there's nothing going to happen.
Yeah.
If only that stayed the same.
I know, again, but that's he's making Russell Davies is making a statement about the Doctor. He's letting us know, most of the people have come to this new, that he's not in. Don't expect Russell Davies to start sort of sidling up to Jackie or any other sort of woman in this episode or in this series, because that's not what he does until he becomes David Tennant, and that's exactly what he does.
Yeah, and that's
It's not that far off from Grandma and on Church on Ruby Road going, I just want my tea, and then she's flirting with him. Oh, you're a cute one. I want to watch you.
Mm-hmm. And there's one more thing I want to show you folks before we go to a nice, easy other criteria. This is just a small point, but I'm looking for seeds of where the series starts to maybe go wrong later when they're trying to echo these things. Look at this one, for example. It's a short line. Oh, suddenly the entire world revolves around you, Rose. And I find that fascinating that he dismisses that, because there's another character called Rose in the Star Beast where the world does seem to revolve around her, and it's been allowed by the same blooming writer. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, but we'll get into why RTD is different to the RTD in 2005. There's a complete difference in the man. A lot's happened to him since 2005. He's had personal tragedy in his life as well. And, you know, he went to America and they drink the Kool-Aid over there. When they drink the Kool-Aid over there, they come back, they come up with all of these mad ideas and, you know, use words like diversity and inclusion and the message. So, you know, I don't think you can really judge what he's done after season 1 or you know, the things that he done later on. Season 1 itself, you know, if you look at it on its own, is completely different tonally to season 2, 3, and 4. So, you know, if he hadn't had that falling out with Christopher Eccleston, or Eccleston hadn't had a falling out, we probably would have got a couple of more seasons of Eccleston's Doctor. And I don't think it would have went in the direction it went in if Eccleston had stayed.
But isn't it funny? Isn't it funny, Noel, that we are, as certain fans, accused of not going with the times and change and all the rest of it. And Doctor Who's always been like this. I'm just making, as you know, I'm just pointing out to people who are watching. No, things have changed, because that's the same writer and the same character called Rose, but actually now the world does seem to revolve around these characters, you know, even to the level that the Doctor's told off about how they use their language, whereas here he puts her in a place, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the Doctor, even Tennant's Doctor put, you know, Donna in her place. He put Martha Jones in her place. There's always been that kind of trope in it, especially during the Whittaker era. She liked to put everybody in their place and mess things up, but still put them in their place. Somehow it was their fault. Look, RTD is a different beast now. I mean, the Rose character in this new era is obviously Rose Noble. It's Donna's daughter, which I say very, and I have to be careful on YouTube. So, but you know, he's just a different animal now. He's just a different writer. He experiences all and the stuff. Look, he's fully on board with the leftist agenda, so he's going to reflect that in his writing. I mean, even in 2005. We all have to remember that RTD was quite opinionated and controversial even back then. It was just, you know, he didn't. He liked to give a balanced view on issues back then. Now I feel he's just going to give his opinion and what he believes the outcome should be, and that's the difference.
And that's what I mean. I think it's really good to go back and look at some of this stuff, because I really found it liberating to think, do you know what? I am giving you a chance. You really landed this episode. You really did.
Yeah.
You landed the launch, but it's interesting how I think sometimes his dialogue nowadays seems a bit more labored. Now, I'm going to move everybody swiftly to criteria 2. For those of you joining us who haven't seen us do a review, we're judging on 3 criteria. So we've mentioned the first one. This one is the use of resources. Again, it's up to the panelists what they're judged on within that. Is it the visual effects? Is it the direction? Whatever. You see a few examples there. But it's just so that we are as objective as we can be within our discussion. So, Michelle, where would you like to go with this on your judgment?
I think criteria 2, good use of the actors. It felt like 2005. It felt very much like it was a real world that they lived in, versus sometimes like the sets were accurate. Rose's room is an absolute mess. The apartment is not the most tidiest in the world, so it feels like it's a lived-in environment. Sometimes we get these sets now that they just look a little too perfect, and that's why I think it was refreshing with you go back to Church on Ruby Road, Ruby Sundays. The apartment felt lived in. There's pictures on the wall. So I think it was a great use. I think the Murray Gold music is the less Murray Gold we've ever seen. He's very restrained in this choice of orchestration compared to maybe the more bombastic that he gets during the Moffat years and the Smith years. The very, very bombastic. He's very low keyed. And I was going to point out, we're just jump back one second for talking about the dialogue. This is also 2005, where they're going to have today. They would not have a man put a woman in her place now, because they don't want to be accused of mansplaining.
True. Where do we go, Hugh? Let's ask you on this one, on the use of resources.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, there are questions about some of the special effects. Even then, I think there were questions about some of the special effects. But I'm sort of with Noel that I found that reasonably charming.
Yeah,
I'd like to pick up in terms of that point from Michelle about the time. It was 2005. Watching it, where it makes that whole thing about London, which was still cool then. So I had a discussion with a friend of mine who was saying he doesn't think London is as good as it was, and I think London's peak time is from Charles and Diana's wedding up to the Olympics.
Yeah,
and that's when the growth is, and that's when it comes out of the wall. And it's very much, you see her on the red bus, notably an old-fashioned red bus in terms of jumping off rather than one with sliding doors, and it puts you in the scene like that. The direction in terms of that's very good. The speed of it, as John said, in terms of that, is excellent. I think that's why I'm probably with Noel that if there had been an extra 10 minutes, there might have been certain things that you elided because it was necessary that might have worked better. And so one thing, just in terms of a couple of things that are looking at it and being nitpicky, the fact that Mark Benton's character has pictures of Eccleston, who is new to Eccleston, is a bit really, but you can see why it's done. And the fact that Mark Benton's character is then killed by the Autons
in front of his wife and kid.
Yeah, you're thinking that's a bit convenient that you've been talking about death and then it happens, but again, it's doing it in that speed, and that's what I have to do. Mark Benton's a good actor, obviously had come off of appearing in Second Coming by Davis and appearing with Eccleston. Obviously had that going. So yeah, I mean, I could be nitpicky about it, but again, it's the speed, and that makes it enjoyable.
Yeah, my only issue really with the second criteria for me is I'm not going to judge the visual effects because they were of their time, they were fine, and as you say, it's part of Doctor Who's kind of vibe. The direction was all right, as in that's been too scathing. That's not fair. The pacing, I agree. It told the story so fast, as we've said a few times now. I think it was just that tonal clash that Noel Clarke pointed out, and I did see that, and I thought, well, that's not the director's fault. I agree. That's just higher up. But if I'm going to be nitpicky, because on visual effects, fine. That's as it was. The music. Do you know what? The one thing I got irritated by, and it wasn't just in this one. He did it in loads of them at Murray Gold in these early days. That bell. You know, at the end of a scene, that ringing bell thing. It just nauseated me. I just didn't know why we were doing that. I thought the bell, for God's sake, it seemed to be his trademark. But yes, I'm judging this as I was happy with this. I can't judge it on anything else. I mean, direction, costume, the Autons were a really good realization. And as John hinted at earlier, we will discuss the Autons in a moment specifically. But yeah, I'm happy with this one. Timescales, where would you go on its use of,
Brendan,
process?
well, I wanted to mention what Scottish Davros said in the chat here, that Russell T Davies has been California'd. Excuse me, no, we didn't do it. Isn't Russell T Davies the one responsible for Queer as Folk before it even came over to America? So I'm just saying, he didn't get California by us.
No, he's been LA. He's been LA'd. He's been LA'd.
LA'd. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that some kudos need to go out to the director of this, who was Keith Boak. And if you look at the interaction between Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper, if you look at the interaction with them, there was some really good directing and prep that went on behind the scenes before we ever saw this episode. And there we go. It was Keith Boak that directed this. And, what an absolute wonderful job to bring out this spark between those actors, because I think that with a different cast, that this may not have had as much impact or as much. And fair to call Rose a successful television episode because it effectively relaunched the series. Now, as far as the writing of the episode, there were a couple of other writers. One of them is uncredited. And let me see if these are on this card you have up, Brendan. Okay. One of the other writers was Robert Holmes. And I don't see that on there. And then there was an uncredited writer, Sidney Newman. So this is not all down just to Russell T Davies as the showrunner and the writer. There was a team effort. Now, as far as Murray Gold,
timescales. Just to interrupt, it's not really. They're credited Sidney Newman because of the origination. So that's Sidney Newman who started Doctor Who in 1963, and Robert Holmes is credited for coming up with the Autons. So it's like
Holmes died in the 80s.
It's like Kit Pedler being credited on every Cyberman story. Yeah. Okay. So this is all Russell, and I think it shows.
It's amazing how much he's changed. It's really odd to look at then and now. And now, as far as the music with Murray Gold, once again, being an American, I'd never heard of Murray Gold before, and it seems that, like Michelle was saying, I agree with Michelle on that this was a much more tame musical tone than what Murray Gold eventually evolved into later on. Murray Gold's music, it did become a little bit loud. But here, it seems like everything matched perfectly. And if I were to have to rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 9.9.
Well, that means you're going to have to judge it as outstanding then, because our criteria is 4, 4 levels. But we'll come to it. Oh, you always invent new levels. What's going on here? So, John, you're sitting very, John's sitting very quietly, and I know
It's California.
while we've got John there, so basically, yeah, I'll flash up some slides and various things. But of course, your judgment of this?
Yeah, well, I'll keep it brief because I think everybody's covered a lot of what I would have said anyway. But just talk about the acting. What this show also does, in addition to reintroducing Doctor Who, is introduce us to a set of regulars, which we're going to become familiar with over the next 2 years at least. You know, it's not just Jackie, it's not just Rose and the Doctor. We get to meet Jackie Tyler, her mother, and Mickey, her boyfriend. And it shows you how well cast this is, because at the end of the first episode, you know how well drawn these characters are. You really have a handle on them. But Mickey is very much Rose's boyfriend, but still nonetheless a draw on her. She's very much in charge of this relationship, and he's holding her back. And Jackie, again, her mother, whom she loves, but very much holding this person back, although not written in such a cack-handed way that you get to dislike the characters for what they're doing to Rose. And over the course of the episodes to come, we build up an affinity and liking for these characters. So they're written very, very well, but more to the point, they're acted very well as well. And it's always been to my great disappointment that one of the characters who has never returned to Doctor Who is Jackie Tyler. After season 4, that's her gone, because I think Camille Coduri, hats off to her, she produced one of those great Doctor Who characters and just endeared herself to fandom and the general public alike. Yet again, this is just a team working so well to make sure that this is going to be a well-liked program, not just by ex-Doctor Who fans, new Doctor Who fans, science fiction fans, horror fans, fantasy fans, soap opera fans, but by all of them. And it's mixing all these ingredients together so expertly that it held on to the majority of that first night audience. Well done.
Yeah, and as I come to Noel, I'm just going to flash this up one more time, because when people sometimes wonder why we use these, I think on this one, because it's the launch of the whole new series, yes, I'm going to use one criteria from this only, which is the choice of actors, because you have to get Chris Eccleston right, you have to get Billy Piper right, and they took the mick out of that, remember? They got the composer right. They got, as we've just heard, we've got Jackie Tyler. We've got the whole team, Noel Clarke. Everybody was really well. It was a good ensemble piece, as John was really saying there. And I will only judge Criterion 2 on this one with this episode, because it's a launch and you've got to get every character right. Noel, where would you like to go on your judgment of this?
I think it does everything perfectly, to be quite honest with you. I think the characters, the actors and actresses that they got in, absolutely spot on. John is right. I mean, you look at Jackie, I mean, how much screen time did Jackie actually have throughout the whole run of Doctor Who? But she was well developed and we all fell in love with her. The same with Mickey. Look where Mickey started off. He started off as a bit of an idiot, but then, like, you know, Noel Clarke might have had complaints about the character at that time, but if you look how that character was developed over time, then by the time we get to see him again, he's confident. You know, Mickey is not the idiot anymore. He's like, he's out there, he's battling away. So, you know, RTD, look, just, it was like everything just aligned perfectly back then. And, you know, it just, I don't think you'll ever get that again. That's the thing. I think RTD is trying to recapture that. And I think that's going to be the danger for him moving forward. You're never going to recapture this again. This was a once-off. This, you could never replicate that again. It was just, everything was perfect. Trailer was perfect. You know, the gap was perfect. You know, you look at now, we've had Doctor Who now for how long? New Who now, what, 15, 16 years now, whatever it is?
19.
19, there you go, right? So to me, after 19 years, the show has kind of gone a bit stale, really. So, you know, rebooting it again is not, we'll get into it, but it's not going to work. But RTD is night and day. to the RTD that we got back then. But I have no problems with this. I mean, the CGI was at its time. I actually thought it was pretty impressive for back then. But no, I love this. Listen, you're not going to get me to say anything negative about this, no matter how hard you try. I'm not.
I hope you're wrong. I really hope you're wrong, Noel. Could you imagine if the next season? We don't know yet because we haven't seen it. Can you imagine if the next season ended up being anywhere near this brilliant? I hope. Well, that's why I'm saying I hope.
If it does, you know, I'll say fair dues to him. He's brought back the show that we love and know, and we can get behind it again and enjoy Doctor Who again. That's all we want as fans, though. We want them to be able to deliver. But if he thinks by harping back to his greatest hits, you know, which seems to be the direction he's going in, it's not. You can't con an audience like that. Because the first time it was done naturally, this time you're kind of trying to force it. So it's not going to come across the same way. It's not going to have that heart. You know what I mean? We're not going to love these characters the way we did the last time round. You know what I mean? There's not going to be that connection.
Well, as was hinted at last time, Noel, in 2005, I think Doctor Who was needed and it was wanted back. And the British public, at least, were ready for it and ready to receive it in such a positive light. And the stars aligned with RTD. Lorraine Heggessy, in charge of BBC One. Jane Tranter, head of drama. The stars aligned, which hadn't aligned earlier with Jonathan Powell and various other executives at the BBC. So everything just aligned. And I think the British public were ready for this. Now, are the British public ready for Doctor Who in 2024 in the same way? And I agree, there's a difference. Just before I come to John, I was going to say, it's 19 years old. We would now be into the first season of Peter Davison, season 19.
Yeah.
It was freshened up with a new Doctor. You could say, shoot, he's going to do that. Leisure Hive and that season had freshened up Doctor Who from the music onwards, the costume of the Doctor, and how it was basically directed. So there'd been some it had been freshened up a little bit by 19 years. Now this time it's just, is it freshened up in the same way? And as I come to John, I'll just say, what do they say? Never go back, never revisit. And I just think where RTD hit his peak and did really well in that first 4 seasons, I don't know, it's not sitting the same. And it's maybe not just because RTD's changed, as we all have, but the world is different and the society is not receiving it in the same way. Sorry, John.
Yeah, there's probably an awful lot of truth in what you say there, but in terms of the British public or the international public now being ready for it, you have to remember that even as late on into Jodie Whittaker's first season, when they took the drastic, some might say, step of creating a female Doctor, the overnight audience was still bigger than the overnight audience for Rose. Yeah. People were still willing to give Doctor Who the benefit of the doubt, irrespective of the fact that this was now a product or a program now, let me see, what would that be now, 12, 13 years into its stride. So it was still an old property in television today. And also on top of that, the television market had diversified. You know, there was the beginning of streaming. People were on tablets and children were a dispersed audience, if you like. And yet there was still a big audience sitting, waiting to see that. And I think that irrespective of how you tinker with Doctor Who, if the core principles are still there, but more to the point, if the characters and the story and the storytelling are all good, people will stick with it. The only reason they jumped off was because it was pretty badly told stories, because it was written by a H-word.
See, I agree with John there.
Now, so we finish this, just there's one last thing to say, no, and then Bowman's come in. But if Russell Davies has come back specifically to drop the message, I don't care, provided he does it deftly and succinctly and somewhere mixed in. And at the same time, he's telling us rollicking good stories. I'll be cool with that. So far, he hasn't, because if the Starbase was anything to go by, it was dreadful. And with the whole story screeched to a halt while he physically turned almost and lectured us as an audience about why Rose Noble was so special and why the Doctor being male presenting wasn't. So if this is a thing of a way of things to come, then I'm with Noel. I'm not looking forward to it. But I think the British public will, and the international public, will give this show yet another chance.
Yeah.
If it's good, and let's hope that it is.
That's what I mean. 14 million people tuned in to watch Jodie Whittaker's opening. No matter what we think of that, 14 million tuned in overnights, right? Highest number to watch the show. It was 13 point something, but we just say 14 million to round it off. But it was still the highest viewed episode. So John is right. There's still, because I think this show hasn't endeared itself to fans, especially the new Who era. It done quite well. The first 5 seasons, let's just say. It garnered a lot of respect for the from the audience and the British public. And the British public do feel protective of Doctor Who. Got to be honest. You've seen it when they seen it hasn't produced. They've walked away rather than tune in and watch a dead horse being flogged. You know, they have walked away. The thing about it is what RTD see. You can't really refresh the show if you're bringing back the old crew, because you're going to be stuck in this time warp. And I believe that's what RTD is stuck in. I believe that some of the stories that he produced back in his era, he's going to do more with them. And that's not really refreshing the show. There is still, look, the appetite may not be the same for Doctor Who as it once was, but John is absolutely spot on. If you give us anything that resembles a decent story, you're halfway there. Then you just need to develop the character. It's not even a hard fix.
Well, let us move on now, because we've still got a bit to do. As mentioned in Burning Issues, John mentioned the Autons, and I promised we'd have our moment. So here comes our segment. I know. So, John, I'll have to give you opening gambit on this one because you mentioned it first. But basically, the realization of the Autons.
Brilliant. Love the Autons. What it did, it took the 1970 Autons from Spirit of Space we're seeing there and give them a bit of a budget, which they didn't have back then. They actually looked like shop window dummies and not like men and women in plastic masks. And to the extent that someone kinky like Brendan found them quite attractive, but enough said about that, the better. Yeah, these were, even down to the fact, this is why it was so special, they even had the same sound effect for their wrists, their hands dropping away, and their guns firing as we hear as they attack the shopping centre.
Yeah.
This was done with love and a real tribute to a real scary monster. Spirit of Space is one of my first Doctor Who memories, and as a result of that, brought me into the show.
It's a great story, though.
I was terrified by Saturday afternoon shopping with my mother and seeing shop window dummies, not quite trusting them. And to that extent, they did exactly the right thing. If you want to get a child audience involved, if you want to frighten them and show them that in Doctor Who particularly, the everyday can become fantastical, then the Autons are a great simplistic way of doing that, and it was spot on. But more to the point, they were represented really well. To an extent that later on in the Moffat era, the Autons get a bit overused with the Rory dummy and all that, which I didn't buy into. This is what the Autons should be doing, sort of like plastic coming to life and then shooting people down. It's just a shame that when they did come back, we didn't get the notion of proper plastic taking control of the world, be that through credit cards, plastic chairs, or boob implants, for goodness sake. There's still potential for the Autons to be used big time in Doctor Who, but ultimately they must always be creeping, walking figures like that, especially coming out of shop windows or down in the basement, coming alive.
And even Rose,
People like Rose.
even Rose mentioned even breast implants, didn't she? Could kick off when all the plastic is revived. I mean, that would have been.
Of course, if the Autons use breast implants, they might make a boob.
Well, they're very good. They're very quick there. JWC, they moved really well, not as stiffly as the Pertwee Autons. I'm not complaining, but you all know I'm just a little bit. The only thing I would say, comparing Spearhead from Space and Terror of the Autons to this realization, tick, 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 tick. Apart from, I just wonder whether they should have looked more sinister. I mean, I don't know if it's as bad as the police drivers in Terror of the Autons, where he pulls the mask off and you get that sinister thing. But, you know, they actually look acceptable, if you get my gist. Now, whether you go, well, no, but this is...
They are short window dummies. They must look acceptable.
Yeah.
With clothes.
And that's what I was going to say, whether they're going for absolute, you know, authenticity, whereas the old Doctor Who didn't do that. They never looked like mannequins in the 70s.
Yeah, the mannequins in Spirit from Space, I mean, you'd never buy a thing that they were wearing. They're horrible. No.
Yeah.
These are proper shop window mannequins, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
And some of them are children.
Yes. The bride, the women coming down, the brides trying to kill Jackie.
He respected them. See, this is the thing. It was done respectfully. It was done with love, as John said. And you could feel that. And that's where I think us as an audience all gravitated towards it. You know, this is where I gravitate towards this episode more than all of them. I've watched this probably the most of all New Who episodes, to be honest. It was just, he respected everything that came before. And you know, he'd won back over a Doctor Who fan, and at the same time he was winning over the casual audience, and we saw that. And you know, again, you know, they had to look like the shop window dummies of the 2005s, obviously in the 70s and 80s. I even remember shop window dummies in the 80s. They looked scary as a kid. They were totally different as well, different tone color as well, and their eyes were always mad looking, like evil eyes on them. I used to be scared of them growing up as a kid. So watching this actually did have a little bit of a scare factor for me. I really enjoyed it, and it was, think about it, like Clive is killed in front of his wife and his kid, like when they're going on the rampage. I mean, that was pretty dark. Yeah, exactly. That was pretty dark. You know what I mean? That was scary. Like, so it was done, but you know, even though he wanted to make it for a family audience, did added those kind of sinister elements in that you would have probably got in the 70s versions of them. Do you know what I mean? So you know,
because we don't see Clive die. It's more horrific that we don't see him die and see the reactions of his family.
Exactly.
That's far worse.
Exactly.
And that is very like the 70s. The Mark Benton character is the type of character, you know, to an extent, a red shirt. And say, the fact that he was about whenever they came out was convenient, but I think it's a very good use of, you've got a reasonable famous actor, you've got someone, a character who's got a reasonable number of lines, who is then killed. That's you've got jeopardy there. Yes, and what you don't do is go and kill Mickey or Jackie, because that's too soon. But then we never kill anyone now, so it doesn't matter.
No. And Clive was a likeable character, like, you know.
Yeah. The jeopardy was there, as in that scene, and I remember, I think we all saw it in the Doctor Who magazine or various outlets when they were showing you the making of this before we saw everything, was they were proud of that scene in the shopping centre precinct where it was a massacre. It was a massacre. And as Michelle said, with the bridal Autons coming out the window and Jackie's hiding behind the taxi. And of course, she did, as Hugh was saying, it would have been too early, but she looked as though she was going to come a cropper, and in a way, indirectly saved by her daughter. But no, that was a really strong scene. And I think that's where RTD has tapped into the 70s, has made it more invigorated with a bigger budget, of course, and made the Autons a threat again? Now,
Yeah.
our last criteria, just so we've got it tidily there, is engagement of audience. Now, I think this is going to be quite a short one because I guess it's just whether you're saying it's outstanding as it's really engaged, blah, 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 or whether you think it falls down into just good. So if I just went around the panel and just something you've not said so far, I know we all like it. It's just in engagement, how it grabbed us in various forms or others. So timescales.
Okay, well, one thing about the Autons, but before I answer this, Brendan, those were particularly horrifying to myself and my brother because there was a mall chain here in California in the 1970s that had windows which appeared to have mannequins in them, but they were real people. And every once in a while, they would have makeup on, so they looked plastic. And then every once in a while, they would move and just scare the hell out of everybody. And it was really hilarious. But as kids, it was a little traumatic if we weren't expecting it. So the first time was really scary. And then we would just kind of sit back knowing what was going to happen. And we would watch the other people walk by and get just as horrified. But so as far as engagement, it was extremely engaging to me because I couldn't believe that Doctor Who was back. And I think I learned of it on Usenet. This would have been back around 2004. I learned of it. There was a rec.arts.doctorwho Usenet group. And I remember someone saying that Doctor Who is filming and it's going to be back the next year. So I was really looking forward to it. And I actually watched it 2 days before it aired. I watched the leak where an employee at CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, actually took the episode and uploaded it to a file sharing network, which was absolutely wrong to do. And I think that they got fired for doing it. But I was looking forward to it so much. I got a friend of mine to show me how to use BitTorrent. That way I can watch this Doctor Who, because I could see the file on there, but I didn't know how to watch it. So he came over and showed me how, and we watched it together. And it was absolutely engaging to me a couple of days before it was going to be broadcast, I think on the Sci-Fi Network. Now, if I went to that much trouble to do something like that, to watch something that I was really looking forward to, of course I was engaged. And the most pleasing aspect of it to me was at some point during watching it was realizing that not only has this screwed up like I feared, but it actually really is real, authentic Doctor Who, and it's back. And I teared up. I don't typically tear up watching anything on television or at movies, but with this particular Doctor Who episode, it was very emotional to me because I was afraid that it was going to get screwed up and then finally be gone forever. And at some point, very early into it, within the first 10 minutes of watching this leaked file on BitTorrent, I actually teared up. And I don't recall that being the case with any other episode of Doctor Who or anything else I can imagine.
Yeah,
I think there were some sad episodes of Lassie or something like that. But
yeah.
yes,
I
it
must
was
admit,
extremely engaging.
considering I'm a mad Doctor Who fan, I know I can't, that level of emotion, I can't imagine. I just want to call out Craig Lightower. Hello. It's amazing, isn't it? It doesn't matter how old people are. I think it's always important to go back to what is Doctor Who all about. My now teen daughter is still genuinely wary of mannequins after watching Rose. Not so much plastic bunnies, lad. Yeah, but I know it's amazing how this program can do that. Anyway, going down the panel on engaging you, something new, Hugh?
Yeah, so I mean, I think sort of covered some of this before, but in order for it to work, you had to have the feeling that Rose was representative of you.
Yeah.
And for Billy Piper's 22 rather than 19 of the character, but for an actress to come in and do that, and to do that for what was a 41-year-old man at the time, or a 40-year-old man at the time, I thought was deeply, deeply impressive. I think the writing's deeply impressive from that, and I think that's I know some people might think it's wrong to have started with Rose rather than Doctor. I think it was a stroke of genius.
Yeah. And where would you like to go with this, Michelle?
Nice.
I was completely engaged. Again, it's been several years since I last watched Rose, and right now I'm like majorly busy, really stressed, trying to finish writing up a book. Got a new turtle write for my job. But for the 47 minutes I watched this, I was engaged. I was enjoying myself. Unlike last week where I kept pausing it to see how much longer we had left.
That
You
was
know,
hard.
there are a couple times where I was rewinding back to catch a funny line again or something. So I really enjoyed this. Took me away. It was an enjoyable time. It's still very engaging. Just a wonderful episode.
Right. Okay. Well, we're going well down here, John.
Yeah, look, you said something new. The thing about it is, Brendan and everybody else on the panel, it wasn't just was me that was engaged and the rest of us on here. The population of viewers who watched it were engaged, and 19 years later, we're still watching Doctor Who. It just shows the amount of goodwill there was for Doctor Who, and if it's properly done and engages the audience will come, the audience will sit, and the audience will watch it, irrespective, and this is the important point, irrespective of what the visual effects looks like, because the minute Doctor Who relies on visual effects and special effects and CGI, forget it. Go and create something new. Not what Doctor Who's about. Admittedly, it should look good or look as good as it can do for the budget, but it's never had to, nor should it ever have to look up there with Hollywood blockbusters. That's simply not Doctor Who. But in terms of engagement, I was engaged. So far on the panel, we're all engaged, but more to the point, the viewing public were engaged to the extent that it kept coming back year after year after year, just like it did first time round.
And just before I come to Noel on this, if there's anything new to say, if there isn't, we'll move on to our final item. But basically, just before we do, there's the facts of it. 10.81 million and actually a 43% audience share. That's not happening at the moment, I have to say. And of course, if you do your comparisons with other Doctor Who episodes, it's beaten into third place by Destiny of the Daleks and The Woman Who Fell to Earth, as Noel mentioned a while back. But it was a hell of a success. And I have to say, I personally didn't expect it was going to hit that big. Knowing the competition, knowing it was back on Saturday night, I know that's where we like Doctor Who, but it can be highly competitive. And Doctor Who had been out the game. And of course, just to plonk itself and to win the audience that quickly, as I always say, you know, I'm a teacher, and at work, people were discussing this episode. It was unbelievable. People who weren't Doctor Who fans, I mean, there's not many of them really who ever own up, but in the staff room, teachers were talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, whether they fancied Chris Eccleston, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. They were engaged with it. And as I said to you earlier in this program, the kids were talking about it. So it was a win-win-win. And so the ratings, the audience share, the marketing, as we've mentioned, really had worked. It got traction, and we're away with it. Now, Noel, anything else you want to say about your engagement with this? Anything new?
No, just to say, because everybody has made the same point, so I don't want to repeat. But this was lightning in a bottle, and I do believe you'll never get this again. If we were to get consistently 8 million watching Doctor Who each week, I would actually consider that a success nowadays, because the TV landscape has changed a little bit. People do watch shows, you got the binge watch model, and then you've got, the streaming services. You might drop 2 episodes like what Doctor Who was going to be doing the first night, and then a weekly episode after that. But look, everybody has said it, this just engaged on every level. It hit all the right notes. It was respectful to what came before, which was most important, especially to fans like us. But also, it had the great ability to win an audience over, and it most certainly did. And it was, you're right, you know, people that I never never hear talk about Doctor Who. We're talking about Doctor Who. It was on everybody's lips, and then he follows it up with the end of the world, like, you know what I mean? Another great episode. I'm just gonna say, but yeah, it was engaging on every level. I don't mind the special effects. I mean, again, I think that adds to the charm now when you look back and watch that episode.
Well, I've
You'll
got a
never get that
final.
again. It's sad. You'll never get that again. But
No.
you can come close. Look, the one thing that RTD need, and if I was to play to RTD, this is what I'd say to you. Just keep it simple. Remember those times when you did produce the Doctor Who that you did, and keep that in mind when you're writing your new stories. And I know it's already too late because he's got 2 seasons in the can. But if he has done that, I will be absolutely over the moon, because it means Doctor Who is back where it belongs. And I do believe that it can be one of the top shows again if someone respects it and respects its audience as well, which it hasn't done in the last 5 or 6 years, in my opinion.
Well, my final question, yes, I hear to that, Noel. I mean, yes, if only that could happen. But last question, come in if you want. If you're happy, we leave it. But I have to say, looking at this, I wanted to look at this again. And next week, we'll look at another launch of another season opener. Did anyone see any seeds of problems that would develop later? So, for example, I'll give you a few, which is, and well, I've got quite a lot. I mean, yes, it's fast and pacey. Sometimes, though, the argument is when you do that an awful lot, you're missing something else, and it becomes a formula. Not knocking this, and everybody understand what I'm saying in the thread. I can say 2 things at once. I can say that I'm happy with this episode, but when things become a formula, it can become a problem. So yes, fast and pacey, but we don't want every episode of Doctor Who to be fast and pacey. It had the modern context, great. Young girl, assistant, yeah, well, that's the usual vibe. Using the TV role in news, yep. Dysfunctional family, RTD seems to like doing those. Doctor in the thick of the action when we start, media res, classic monster, the humour, use of celebrity gossip. You know, when the Chris Eccleston Doctor was reading through the magazine, he knows all the answers, as if the Doctor, bothered about the whole of the universe, is actually bothered about who's, with who and all the rest of it. The sexual innuendo that I mentioned earlier. The messaging here was fine, but obviously, when it gets too developed. The burps and the farts, RTD does like that sort of thing, and he does develop on that one, as if that's for the kiddies. We had the Shadow 15 Shadow Proclamation, didn't we? Which was a nice kind of element there. The Time War wasn't named, but as Michelle said, it was certainly referenced. Some fans think that has become a problem. That became a problem with the series. It was overused and a battle-weary Doctor, and whether that was a good thing or not.
Well, it's only, can I just say on that, the Time War, because that RTD does get a lot of stick for that, and I just want to defend him on that. It wasn't his fault that Moffat decided that he wanted to bring back Gallifrey. Yeah. See, RTD's reasoning was he didn't want to go too lore heavy, so he left out Gallifrey and made up the Time War. Now, it was Stephen Moffat that came in, and he decided that he wanted to bring Gallifrey back. So I don't really, I'm not blaming RTD for that one, because, I think that's a bit, every showrunner that will come in will have their own idea of what they want to do, and Stephen Moffat certainly had an idea the way he wanted his era to go. So he wanted to bring back Gallifrey, so I can't, I don't think that the farting and the burping thing, I mean, that's just, that's just for comedic element, and sometimes...
Well, that's what I said. I mean, you hear every word I say. I did actually say that. The other thing I was also saying that is a kind of shortcut is his use of transmissions. The Great Wheel, it was a nice idea. I liked it. Like I said, I liked Rose, but you can start to see how the writer uses things all the time. So the the radio waves from the Millennium Wheel, fine. We saw that with Torchwood. We saw that in Journey's End with the mobile phones. We saw that in Daleks in Manhattan. We saw that with Idiot's Lantern. He does seem to like certain things. First time, second time, but then we need new ideas. So that's all I'm saying. I'm trying to be observant, well prepared, well researched, spend all day on it. That's how I do it. So basically, that's what I'm trying to explain. I'm not just reviewing for the sake of reviewing, because millions of channels do that. I'm trying to make a point about patterns and about certain things that are going on to be objective. So we come to the final thing, which is your judgment. Now, just to remind everybody, not you, but the panelists, but just on the thread there, we've got, if I just take that off again, we have special measures, requires improvement, good overall, or outstanding. And from what you've heard from people, you may be guessing it's definitely going to be good to outstanding. So I'll obviously go around. On the first one there, we have myself. I won't call that an outstanding episode because there's a few. I have to say, I would say it was a very, very good overall episode. I would prefer, and I think Hugh and Noel have mentioned the length of it and maybe a bit more development. That's nitpicky, but it's not an outstanding episode. It's not one I watch all the time, although I know Hugh said you have seen it various times. So if I just go down the panel, it's John next. So John, your judgment overall.
Yeah, I would have said good, and then I watched it again, and given the fact the legacy it's had, I'm going to have to say it's outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh God, you confused me then. Sorry. Outstanding. Okay. Outstanding and good so far. Okay. So my next one is Michelle. So Michelle, if you just bear with me while I just. Okay. So your judgment is, Michelle.
I'm going to go outstanding. It is really run the test of time, and for a reboot of the series, the pilots are very difficult to master. I want to go outstanding.
Right. Okay. I'm keeping an eye on our score here. So next is timescales. It just seems to be on my list here. So timescales, if you bear with me. So outstanding, good, needs improvement, special measures. There are our 4.
That's easy, Brendan. It's 100% absolutely outstanding. And considering that it's been 19 years since I saw that debut and the measures that I went to be able to watch it and recalling how it had an emotional impact on me, nothing but absolutely outstanding.
Okay. Noel, it's your turn. Okay, over to you.
Outstanding. Everybody said everything on the panel. I mean, it definitely was for what it did, what it managed to achieve. John is right. The legacy that came after it, it's just, as I said, the stars aligned and everything was perfect, and you couldn't have hoped for a better launch, and it certainly was brilliant. And you know what? Every Saturday night after that, I was looking forward to Doctor Who was back on TV again, prime time, and every week I couldn't wait to tune in to see where the Doctor was going next. It was seriously that the RTD and Stephen Moffat up to the 50th anniversary. That was hell of a time to be a Doctor Who fan.
It was at its peak.
And
So
never get that again, I don't think, but absolutely fantastic, outstanding.
Okay, so Hugh, to finish off the panel's judgment.
Yeah, so if I was judging this as a story in the middle of a series, if I was judging it at that stage, then I might say good. I think you have to take it. There is a launch, in which case I think it moves up a step, and it's a launch after 19 years. It's not the greatest episode of Doctor Who ever, but for the launch of of this, obviously I've said before, An Unearthly Child is the greatest launch of television ever. Yeah. I think this is up there.
Yeah.
Not quite in that level, but not far off. Outstanding.
Okay, so we've got 5 outstandings and a good from me, and I'm in The company of Craig Lightowler, who's also said in the margin there, it's well over the line of good, only just shy of outstanding. Certainly put this fan's mind at ease after watching on broadcast. Well, you can't knock our panel. We do pore over it. We do look at the details. We don't just freely say it's good or outstanding that easily. We really have gone over it. And so I appreciate that. One final thing just to finish off, and it is just a final kind of tidy up, which is, can anybody remember State of Decay? Kalmar, he was called. He had hair issues, didn't he? Look at that. I mean, he's trying to cover something there, I'm sure, with that hairdo. So Kalmar in State of Decay, one of the rebels. Well, as you know, if you subscribe, if you haven't subscribed, it's a chance, because your subscriptions get us galactic credits, and we can maybe sort his hair out, because we'll pay for his treatment. Is that a good look? Is that a good look? Or maybe that. So basically, we want to help, and subscriptions help us pay for these treatments. This is what it's all about. So please help Kalmar out. You know, he was obviously trying
Why
to...
don't we just turn his head upside down?
I mean, that's a good look, that one, isn't it? That one. I mean,
Like Fabio. Now that's more to his liking. That's a good look for him there. That's a good look.
yeah.
I'll
yeah.
go with
Well,
that one.
well, subscriptions will get us there with galactic credits, and thank you everybody so far for getting us to that lovely stage post. And we wouldn't get there if it wasn't for everybody here, everybody in the margin, and everybody on this panel. So thank you for your time, everybody. Thanks for giving us your honesty as usual. And of course, I think it's time for us to say good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
Mary
night.
Ellen.
Everybody
Bye.
have a great day.
Come on.